Welcome to the Nurses Out Loud radio show. We will be starting in a few moments, so please stay tuned. If you are watching on social media, please give us a like, share, and follow. And for those of you who would like some more info, please go check us out at nursesoutloud.com. Thank you.
Welcome to Nurses Out Loud. Today's episode is extra special to me because I get to introduce someone who has played a very meaningful role in my journey back to the bedside. Her name is Annie, and after I blew the whistle in 2021, I was away from bedside nursing for nearly 2.5 years. When I finally made the decision to return, Annie was the very first person to take a chance on me. She hired me back into the ER at a time when I thought I would never find a place that honored my values and my integrity. And that seriously meant the world to me because bedside nursing was my absolute favorite thing to do. I loved it. And, I'll just never forget the courage and integrity it took for her to do that. And it tells you a lot about the kind of leader she is. Annie has over 20 years of experience in healthcare, 11 as a registered nurse, and she served in leadership roles, including chief nursing officer. She's also a wife and a mom of 2. And she brings a unique combination of pragmatism, ethics, and compassion to everything she does. Today, we're going to dive into real ethical battles nurses face every day: autonomy versus beneficence, informed consent, and the moral distress that comes when patient choices collide with professional judgment. We'll also share practical tools for having these hard conversations with patients and families. And of course, Annie and I will bring real-world examples from our own practice, including situations like leaving AMA and patients wanting to drive POV, private vehicle, to a transfer. This is going to be a raw, honest, and deeply relatable conversation for every nurse who has ever walked out of a shift carrying the weight of ethical tension. Annie, I'm so happy you're here with me.
Jodi, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Guys, so this kind of just happened by chance. I wanted her professional opinion on something, and so I reached out to her, and then we were talking for like an hour, and I was like, girl, you want to do a show? We need to do a show.
Yeah, it just kind of happened naturally, and I'm really glad that you reached out.
Yes, it was. So let's talk about it a little bit, about taking a chance and hiring a whistleblower. I worked
Yeah.
with a doctor. Yeah, so you tell your side of the story. I applied. The doctor I used to work with, did he tell you I was going to apply? Did he tell you anything about me?
He did, and having at the time not having been in Arizona for that long, I really didn't know anything about you.
Mhm.
And after speaking with him about it, I made the choice not to until after I met you. I didn't seek out any information about your situation, the case that you had. I made the decision just to kind of meet you in person. He vouched for you heavily, said that you were a great nurse and a great person, and what you blew the whistle on, he supported. And ultimately, uh, your interview and your presence definitely made me want to give that a chance. And I know you and I had talked about it really recently about the code of ethics and just kind of making sure that we are getting behind nurses who whistleblow, especially when there's, proven reason for it.
Right, right. I mean, I remember in the interview, it was you and one other person, and we went through the whole interview, and then at the end, I said, I don't really need to disclose this, but I am a whistleblower. And I remember you said, "Well, did you blow the whistle for patient safety?" And I said, "Yes." And you said, "That's all I need to know." And actually, we never talked about it again. You know,
No, we didn't.
Right. I even asked you, I was like, so I'm not going to discuss this. I had just really missed bedside nursing. And so I wanted to be just Nurse Jodi. Right. And I
Yeah.
think I did pretty well for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, you did
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like what you just said, where I said, that's all I need to know. I mean, the rest of
Mhm.
it spoke for itself. You had a clean license and good standing. Um, there was nothing alarming as far as, there was a clean background check. There was no
Right.
discrepancies or anything that would alarm me in other ways with a new hire. And I felt totally comfortable with, what was presented. And had you maybe been in another state or, something outside of where you had blown the whistle previously, someone else might have given you that same chance. And it's just
Hmm.
how it worked out. And yeah, I don't regret that decision at all.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I had some patients recognize me. I had some nurses recognize me, but once they did, I kind of just was like, shh, shh, we're not talking about that. I'll talk to you about it like in another room.
Mhm.
Because I really wanted to, keep my anonymity. Like, again, this was my happy place to come back to, So I mean, I looked forward to my shifts, guys. You know what I mean? And just being Nurse Jodi, not the radio host or the author or anything like that. And for about a year, almost a year. And those nurses, because nursing is a really small community. So all of you guys out there listening, especially you new nurses or newer nurses, your reputation, people will find out about you. And it doesn't even matter if it's still in the same state. You could go to another state and, having those conversations at the nurses station, people will know someone who knows someone who knows someone, right? So, just always make sure that you're doing, that you're ethical, I guess, right?
Agreed. Yeah. And especially in Arizona, this is my third state working as a registered nurse. And I can honestly speak to the fact that this has been the smallest nursing community that I've worked
Mm,
in, where, in such a large area, people know each other and have worked with each other just due to the nature of the flexibility in Arizona. Everyone I feel like is working at multiple hospitals. I don't know if it's
right.
the economic environment post COVID. I'm not exactly sure what contributes to it, but I have felt Arizona being more of a transient nursing population, and people just kind of know everybody. So I think if everyone goes into work giving their, best efforts, then it won't come back to bite them.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. I mean, Arizona, there, or just nurses in general, I would think, at least here, they have more than one job. A lot
Yeah.
of them do, right? Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So you get around, you make your way around,
Yeah.
But so with me, how, this is what I want to talk about. We'll talk a little bit about this because this is really a testament to Annie's leadership, and that we're going to get into her style, and I mean, you can just get a feel from her, the way she's, talks and carries herself, that she just is one of my absolute favorite leaders, that I've ever worked around. And she was the CNO at the hospital. And so she oversaw, a lot of different areas. And And when there was a situation, kind of how I was found out, if you will, I had a patient who wanted to take her son private vehicle, and the dilemma that happened. So I guess I could kind of set the stage a little bit to tell the story, and then what happened and all of that. But so basically, I was a triage nurse, and right next door there was a patient with her toddler, and she had come in for respiratory issues, but the patient was going to get discharged. Well, he had the pulse oximeter on him, and when he fell asleep, the nurse noted that his oxygen dipped to 91%. And for the public that's out there, anything less than 92% on room air, requires oxygen, right? Um, but he was sleeping, and when he woke up, he was fine. And then the ambulance had come to pick up the child, and the ambulance said that she needed to put him in a car seat. And she's like, no, he's not going to tolerate that. He is going to scream the whole time. I feel comfortable taking him. And it was this back and forth, this screaming and all of this ruckus that was going on. And basically all I did was go talk to the patient and hear what her concerns were. And she's like, listen, I'm going to go straight to the hospital from here, but he is going to decompensate just from him, being uncomfortable and stuff. I feel comfortable. And I said, well, less than 92%, they're on oxygen. And she goes, yes, I hear all of that. And I said, okay, well, let's talk to the doc. And so then I talked to the doc, and I was like, hey, the patient wants to go private vehicle. I had a conversation with her. She understands the risk versus benefit. And he had said, okay, we'll just have her sign the form. And I was like, okay, well, on the EMTALA form, there is a space where you click for a transfer for it to be an ambulance or private vehicle. And she marked the private vehicle and she left, and I thought everything was fine. But for me, that was a learning experience or a teaching moment, if you will. So I did a reel on it. And I wanted nurses to know, because the doctor did want her to go by ambulance. But again, Annie, all right, risk versus benefit choice, they understand. And so anyway, everything was fine that night until my reel went viral. And then people found out who I was. And then Annie got an earful. Do you want to speak about that?
Yeah. So the physician in question, I guess, wasn't too happy that his story was being shared. And if I remember correctly, he was a little bit disgruntled in the moment that the mother had made this decision to go POV and didn't agree with you bringing up that as an option, which comes down to the ethical piece, right? People
Right.
are allowed to make the choice for themselves. Of course, with children being involved, there's a little bit of difference. But I think what upset the provider in this situation was that it was he felt connected to the story and he felt like it was about him. And it kind of escalated from there. It got, emails were sent back and forth through administration, on how to handle the situation. And I mean, Jodi, you're experienced at this. You didn't do anything that presented any violations of HIPAA, did not give any
Right.
identifiers for facility. It did not give any age, gender. It did not give any identifiers at all whatsoever. It didn't give a date or a time. You don't even identify the facility. One could probably deduce where it was based on, whether or not they knew you. But those other pieces were not shared in a way that was violating any sort of, HIPAA protected information.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I went to bat for you on it. I mean, let's not put
Mm-hmm.
violations where there are none. And I feel like people are really quick these
Right.
days to say, I don't agree with that. That's some sort of violation. And I mean, we have to take a step
Right.
back sometimes and say, what is wrong here? And if there isn't anything, we need to just move on from it. And I remember you and I had to have a conversation about filming and, location choice, I guess, was kind of the
Right.
conversation we ended up having. But yeah, I remember that kind of blowing up way bigger than, in my opinion, it should have.
Yeah, because people were like, "Oh, she was talking about HIPAA." And I know when you and I sat down in the office, we're like, "We have to do HIPAA training every single year." What
Mm-hmm.
exactly did I violate? I didn't. It
Yeah.
was basically a case study, and if you will, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
and in the review that HR did, and they had their attorney look at it, and it was unfounded. There was no HIPAA violation.
Right, right. But then here's another thing in the code of ethics is about workplace safety, okay?
Hmm.
That everybody should feel safe at work. And now they find out that I'm a whistleblower and I recorded. I mean, I did something and I don't take what I did lightly at all. If it was not a grave and specific danger to public health and public safety, I never would have done that, right? I would have went through the chain of command and all of that, which I tried to do, by the way, but that didn't work. But again, we have to think about the climate that we were in. Here we're in a climate in September of 2021 when the entire nation basically was being coerced between their paycheck and an experimental medical intervention. And I was seeing harm. We now know, because now Pfizer and everybody has come out with the harms that it causes, the clots and the myocarditis, etc. And but I was seeing this and nobody was really seeing it. And I'm like, okay, now this just slapped me upside the face. And now I'm afraid for the public. And the public is only getting one side. The only way that I could have that for it to have the impact, right? Because nobody cares about me speaking and me running my mouth. They want to see
Right.
what I'm seeing, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so that's what I did. I showed them for them to make an informed choice, for them to understand that there are risks that I was seeing, and nurses were seeing. And so that's why I did what I did, but that's neither here nor there. What it did come down to was them questioning, are they safe to work around me? And that I took really seriously. And Annie had suggested to me that I have conversations with everybody individually, right?
Yeah. And that ended up kind of bringing everybody, their thought process back around to really questioning what is it that they were upset with, and did they think
Mhm.
you did anything wrong?
Right.
And a moment of
Right.
reflection and getting to know you and what you did and what you stood for, and review that with them, give them that
Yeah,
opportunity to form their own opinion.
exactly. Exactly. And of course, having that conversation, I also was up against people that felt one way about the medical intervention, right? The vaccine, and then other people that felt another way, right? It was but polarizing. And
Yes.
now it's not so much anymore, but it really was then. And so when I did bring them into the, I saw them on shift, like basically every day for like a month. Whenever I saw somebody new, I was like, hey, can I, have a word with you? And then we went into a room and I said, listen, I am a whistleblower. I know that you know that now. I want you to understand that what I did, blah, 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 blah. And I had some people have conversations with me. And I had other people say, listen, I don't agree with what you did, but we can agree to disagree. And then I had other people that didn't say a word to me, but I told them, listen, I want you to understand that I am here. Like, I thought I would never be back here again, but I am, and I love it. And I hope that, that shines through in working with me, because I'm still the same nurse, that I was, yesterday than I am today. And so Annie handled that beautifully, right? She was not going to allow people to bully me and to be mean to me. She asked me to have conversations with people individually, and I did that. Right. So I don't know. Some probably a lot of other people may not have done that. They probably would have, I don't know, Annie, right? Probably tried to push me out the door, try to find some reason.
Yeah, I'm quite frankly probably. It's interesting because I find it the company in question here initially one of their pushes during the opening was that they were not mandating vaccines. They were not requiring proof of vaccination, just declinations were
Mhm.
pretty much afforded to anyone and everyone for the reason that they selected. It was followed all protocols, and I just that whole thing escalated, I just remember thinking to myself, this is somebody with the voice that you guys had 3 years ago or 2.5 years prior to the incident, where everyone was questioning your whistleblowing or your motives behind your posts. And I just thought it was an interesting full circle moment where I was like, you guys weren't in agreement with any of this stuff either. And that's how they got staff, honestly, in the
Right.
beginning.
Right. I mean, for me, I have to drive over an hour to this location. Okay. I've been doing that for almost 3 years now. But the reason, and that's another good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Annie, because there's a lot of nurses out there that they say that they don't like where they work. They don't want to be there anymore, but they feel like every other place is just the same. And for me, I I would have rather gone to waitressing again
Mhm.
than to go against my values and beliefs. And I think a lot of people put a monetary value on their worth, like how much they make versus how settled their spirit feels, like
Mhm.
they'll compromise that for, a six-figure a year job, if you will.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't willing to do that. And I remember in our interview, I said, what's your stance on the vaccine? And you're like, well, we're in Arizona. You can apply for a medical, personal, or religious, whatever you
Hmm.
want. And I was like, okay. And I said, what's the position on mask? And it's like, wear one or don't. And I was like, okay, you're my people, you know?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that for those 2 years, those flu seasons, nobody wore masks. And
Hmm.
that's where I tell people this, that, you know, um, when healthcare workers are given the choice to wear them or not, they won't wear them, right? Because 90% of them won't wear them because they know they don't stop a respiratory infection, unless you're in a room with a patient who is completely symptomatic, coughing, sneezing everywhere in the room, and you don't want to get wet, then you wear one. But yeah, I mean, I was like, okay, well, Lord, I guess here's where I'm supposed to be. And yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a rule follower for the most part. If the place I'm working at wants me to wear a mask for a certain season because I didn't get the flu vaccine, by all means, that's been something, I've been in hospitals and clinics for 20 years, and if that's a rule they're asking me to follow, if that was before COVID, those were the
Mhm.
expectations, and I've never had a problem with it. It was when it became a thing where, well, you have the vaccine and you still have to do it, where I was like, well, then what's the point? And
Yeah.
to me, it was like, well, then you don't think they work. And
Right.
like, if I can get a flu vaccine and not have to wear a mask, why do I have to get a COVID vaccine and still wear a mask? And I just felt
Yes.
like there was a lot of contradiction in that requirement, and it didn't
Mhm.
feel right to me. It didn't sit well with me. And um, yeah, I the place that, the employment place of employment we're discussing right now, definitely that view of not making anyone do anything, within reason.
Mhm.
It wasn't a state mandate at the time, and that resonated with me, and I know it did with a lot of people that work there.
Right. And that's why a lot of people drove, like I did, to work
Yeah.
there. And it was actually great. I got all of my, adrenaline that I wanted to get, right? Because we are, far away from the nearest hospital system, so we do see a lot of emergent patients coming in. So yeah, I mean, and for me too, I felt that way as well. Like, with flu season, it was like, okay, I guess I'll have to wear a mask. But that's because I trusted the science on it.
Mm-hmm.
We won't get into that now, but I've done so much education on it that to me it's a coercive tactic, because they don't work, they don't stop. And it's like, okay, if you don't take the shot, then you have to cover your face for 12 hours,
Right.
and nobody wants to do that. Very, very
Well, and we
few
push.
people.
Yeah. Well, and we push in this discussion where, we are talking about ethics, and
Mhm.
we push our patients to make choices for themselves, to make informed choices. And if I'm making the decision for myself to not, why am I
Mhm.
being punished when we're expected to not do that to our patients? And
Yes,
so
exactly.
it just doesn't make sense to me.
Right, right. And that's another thing. It's like we have autonomy too, guys, We have risk
Yeah.
versus benefit. We have all of that, nurses. We don't, sign away our rights like you're in the military, like you're in the military, the government owns you. You basically have to follow every single thing that they say. Nurses don't have to do that. We
We
don't.
don't.
And people need to stop acting like that. So here, this is a good time to go to break because we're going to pick up on the other half and talk about moral distress in nursing and autonomy and informed consent. But in a post-COVID world, nursing has never been more complicated. We're dealing with patients who don't trust the system, families questioning every decision, and institutions that often silence the very voices meant to protect patients. I know this firsthand. After blowing the whistle, I faced 18 Board of Nursing complaints, all tied to standing up for what was right. And that's why I created Navigating Ethical Waters, a comprehensive approach to nursing ethics, a 10 CEU course designed to give nurses the clarity, courage, and confidence to handle today's toughest ethical dilemmas. From AMA discharges to informed consent, from moral distress to advocacy, you'll learn practical strategies rooted in the 2025 Code of Ethics. This isn't theory, it's real world training for nurses on the front lines. Join me and let's navigate these ethical waters together. Go to righteousrn.com and learn more and see if it is right for you. I like to say, protect your license, your integrity, and your peace. And we will be right back after the break.
If you are a nurse that is fed up with the sick care model, I have a solution for you. My name is Melissa Schreibfatter, and I am the owner and founder of the Functional Nurse Academy. FNA is the most comprehensive functional medicine training program on the market, specifically tailored to nurses. It is self-paced and equips LPNs, RNs, and nurse practitioners to practice functional medicine, address the root causes of dysfunction, and start their independent functional medicine practices. At FNA, you will learn how to order labs, functional health reports, create customized wellness plans, package and price your services, and even how to market your brand effectively. Graduates earn 90 nursing CEUs, and then they qualify for multiple board certification titles. They also will have access to our exclusive tools, such as our Functional Nurse Toolkit, our social media and marketing kit. And I don't want to just train you and send you on your way. So you also will get access to me each month via the Functional Nurse Academy monthly mentorship program, where you will be able to attend a live class with me each month. So say goodbye to sick care and start your dream career as a functional medicine nurse. Enroll today at functionalnurseacademy.com.
All right, guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me here. I am Nurse Jodi O'Malley, and I am joined with Annie, Nurse Annie, and we are discussing some ethical dilemmas and actually like how we handled certain situations. We already went to 3 or 4 of them just right there. You had a lot of ethical dilemmas to handle with me, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess reflecting back on it, I mean, maybe, but it doesn't really, I mean, in hindsight, no, it doesn't really seem like it was too many. I've had a lot worse
You've
ethical
had a lot
dilemmas that
worse.
have shown up in my time as a leader in nursing, and I think, yeah, that was just a little blip.
Yeah. So, you know what? Let's talk a little bit about you. And you started off as a CNA and a PCT, right? And then RN, and now manager,
Yeah,
nurse manager.
yeah.
Yeah. What made you want
I
to get
actually
into
started.
leadership?
It kind of found me. I don't know that I ever sought it out initially. I think it just kind of fell in my lap. I kind of naturally progressed through being, a new grad baby nurse to kind of the more senior nurse in the department to relief charge nurse and then core charge nurse and then assistant manager and then director and then all the way up to suite. And it just kind of naturally progressed that way. And I've always kind of been drawn to like educating or I guess in some ways leading others, to be the best version of themselves, especially at work and while they take care of their patients. And I think I always found myself being that nurse that people modeled behaviors after. And I was definitely thrown into preceptor role pretty early on. And that always went well. I enjoyed that actually. I loved precepting,
Me too.
helping grow the baby nurses into, blossoming into themselves and providing, safe, ethical patient care and coaching them through some of those tough moments where you question, did I do the right thing? In the moment that you described with that mother wanting to take their child POV, I mean, I've had countless patients where, the dilemma is, do we continue coding them when we realize they're a DNR, but the family member at the bedside is, asking us to keep going? Do we continue to keep an 95-year-old who doesn't know who they are anymore on a feeding tube and a breathing tube because we want to make sure that the family is comfortable? Those are all things that I think, come up in question and are hard to navigate if you don't have someone, helping you find the resources. And those are always the things I liked empowering the people I was teaching with. And as a leader, I still empower them with that, the resources that they have at their fingertips, especially in organizations. I know some of the smaller ones, like the one you work for, doesn't have a lot of those resources, but all the larger facilities have moved towards more having risk and quality and ethics departments. And I remember an institution I worked for had a pretty robust ethics department. Anytime there was, a little bit of is this the right way to handle this patient's situation? We would call an ethics call, and they 24/7 we would get on the
Really?
line. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It was amazing. And as the charge nurse, I would be able to just be like, yeah, that's a great case for ethics. And I would get on the phone and we'd put in a consult for ethics. We'd get the physician and the ethics team and the, bedside nurse involved, and we would have conversations, and they would kind of
Right
guide us
there in
through,
real
like,
time.
right there in real time.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was really kind of my first, exposure to nursing ethics, professionally, like really given that resource. And I haven't really come across that too much since that organization I worked at, but it really gave me like a good foundation for
What
understanding.
like area in the United States, East Coast, Midwest, like
West Coast,
um
Pacific Northwest.
oh wow. Okay. Okay. So that's great. I wonder, I've never
Hmm.
heard of that. So
Yeah.
I think that that is wonderful, and that's probably why you are so pragmatic in your approach with things, is because you had that foundation very early on to navigate these ethical dilemmas basically in real time.
Yeah. And we had a lot of them.
Yeah.
Patient, heart failure, right? Patient and heart failure on a Lasix drip. Blood pressure is not being supported by the Lasix drip, so we throw in a dobutamine drip. Patient says, I don't care about my health. I'm going to continue to eat fast food,
Mhm.
and has family bring in Wendy's, Jack in the Box, McDonald's, exceeding their sodium limit in one meal multiple times a day.
Mhm.
And you kind of get to a point where it's like, where do we draw the line?
Mhm.
And that patient was readmitted to the hospital every 3 or 4 weeks because they didn't
Mhm.
want to follow the guidelines for their ailment. And that was anyone who's a nurse knows heart failure is a chronic illness that without a heart
Mhm.
transplant and adherence to the proper protocols is not going to resolve. It just gets worse.
Right.
And, but this individual was alert and oriented. I was on that unit for like 6 years, and, frequent flyer patient, we'd all
Mhm.
get that them again kind of
Mhm.
attitude when they were admitted to the floor. And I just remember kind of questioning at what point do we say is enough? And, uh, do we have that conversation with the patient? And, the doctor kept wanting to force them to, don't bring them water.
Mhm.
Don't let them eat. Don't let family visit. Don't let them do delivery.
Mhm.
Take their phone away. And it's like, something felt off about it. And we consulted ethics, and it was kind of like, well, I mean, the patient is allowed to make the choice to be
Poor
unhealthy.
choices.
Poor
Yeah.
choices are allowed. They're
Mhm.
alert and oriented. If you'd ask them if they knew they were making the wrong choice, they would say, yeah, but I don't really care.
Mhm.
And you're allowed to not care.
Mhm.
Um,
You are. Yeah. Did they ever have conversations? Because it almost sounds a little similar with my dad. I mean, he was this readmit. He was actually aspirating on his own saliva. So there was not much we could do when we found that out, right? We found that out, and he was like, if if I'm aspirating on my own saliva, then why the hell am I doing this G tube and nothing to eat or drink by mouth? He's like, give me my water. I want water,
Yeah.
And the doctor was like, okay. So, and it helped to have a nurse there advocating, right? So I did play a dual role. I was his daughter, but I was also a nurse. And I did have an honest conversation with him and said, listen, Dad, if you do this, this is going to be your life. You are just going to keep winding up coming back into the hospital. And, he made the choice just to be comfortable, to understand that he's not going to stop saliva, right, from going down the wrong pipe. And that he would rather have the water, so that's a little different than the CHF guy, right? Because
It's kind of similar. I mean, you think about what a
kind of
comfort
similar.
measure. Think about what a comfort measure is. What was comfortable for your dad in that situation?
Yeah.
It was more comfortable for him to eat and drink and accept his fate. Kind of, the same with the heart failure patient. It was more comfortable for them to, have enough medicine to keep them breathing comfortably while living the lifestyle they otherwise chose to live. And conversely, I had another patient who was a younger patient using amphetamines and cocaine, put himself in heart failure, and had an ejection fraction of like 10% at like 30.
Oh my God.
And conversely, I had a pretty frank conversation with him that, you're not going to be put on a transplant list if you're not clean and sober, and you're going to die. And it might be tomorrow, might be in a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, but that's probably the trajectory that the path you're headed down, and you have a choice to make, and no one can make it for you. And he made the choice to get clean and sober. And I remember about 6 months after he discharged, he walked back into the nursing unit, came up to our floor, and was like, I'm on the list for a transplant.
Aww.
And you don't get on the list unless you maintain sobriety. So he had passed all the tests, and he gained, 15, 20 pounds, which was healthier for him. And just kind of waltzed onto the floor. Like, I've just got to tell you guys, I'm on the list. And he's like, I don't even know if you guys remember me. And I happened to be there that day. And I was like, yeah, I remember you.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they do listen and they choose the path that we get. And you get so excited, and I feel like as nurses, that's the feeling we're chasing sometimes. Is that like we made a difference, and we lose sight of the fact that sometimes we're not going to change people's mindsets, and that not everybody's going to make the turnaround and the choice to follow provider recommendations and get on the list for a transplant.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think, you and I, we have a similar approach, a similar, like, you light up a room, you walk in the room, you light it up, I've heard that my whole life, and being a nurse, like again, I love it. And it comes across, people understand that, they feel safe with you. They know they're going to get the truth from you. And that's the thing for everybody out there listening, is that is an ethical duty to be honest and truthful. Like Annie just said, her story about her patient telling him like, hey, listen, buddy, like, this is where you're going. I'm telling you, I've seen it before, obviously in a kind and loving way. But that's a difference between loving what you do, like feeling called to be a nurse, and looking at nursing as a paycheck. There's a lot of new nurses out there, over the last 5 years, boy, they got their they were thrown to the fire. And right away they were like, oh, whoa, I thought I was just going to work 3 days a week. I was going to make 6 figures. You know what I mean? And, this isn't happening. They're making me do a lot more and I don't really like it, those are the ones, well, they kind of needed to get weeded out, I think, I mean, it's a good thing that, COVID kind of did weed them out. The problem is that it weeded out a lot of good nurses, that were like, I'm not going to comply. You're not going to remove my autonomy and my informed consent and shared decision making, just because you decide to, so, it's a balance there, but that's important to have those conversations, like you were caring for your family member or your sister or your brother in the bed. Like, when they hear it from their nurse, I don't think a lot of nurses realize that they can have those conversations with patients.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, it's not just that you can, it's that you should.
There you go.
Right.
There you
And
go. There you go.
we have the power and the knowledge. That's what we were educated on, is side effects of medications. What's expected if you do and don't follow doctor's orders. That's our duty, is to empower the patient.
Yeah.
And give them,
right.
break it down in a way that's easy for them to understand. But ultimately put the power back in their hands. You have choices to make. If you're if you're in the hospital because your type 2 diabetes is out of control because all you do is sit around and eat potato chips and you don't eat protein and you don't take your insulin and you don't exercise, and you end up hospitalized with wounds and neuropathy and all of those things that cause your blindness, any of the millions of complications you can have secondary to poor blood sugar regulation. Right. That's maybe they don't understand what the consequences are. Sometimes people think that you can wave a magic wand, and I think sometimes putting that in perspective, that there is no magic wand. Right. It takes effort, compliance, trial and error with different regimens.
Being
nothing's
uncomfortable.
perfect.
Being uncomfortable. It's hard to make
100%.
change.
It is hard. It's very hard to make change, and it's hard to accept sometimes that we're the cause of our problems, or that we're our own worst enemy. And also, it's okay to realize you're not going to, as a nurse, that you're not going to save everybody.
Right. Exactly. I just went with my son. He had a knee surgery, and with not playing sports, and me just focused on the ethics course and doing all of that, we were both like, okay, we need to get back in the gym. He just had his 10-week post-op visit, and girl, I went there and went on a body scanner today. Ooh, okay. Let's just say visceral fat. And I'm like, that's the reason why I can't suck in my stomach. So that's the thing, guys. Hey, here's the thing. If you stand there and suck in your stomach, and if it doesn't move that much, you got visceral fat. Let me just say that, And but again, and then it said that my age was 55 and I'm 50. And I'm like, okay, all right. I'm not on any meds or anything, thank God. But that was a wake-up call. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was like, here, and of course, when I told him I was a nurse, he was like, oh my gosh, you guys are the worst. You know better. I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't know. Yeah, here's your basal metabolic rate, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, and here's the ball in your court, right? You've been given the information, and it's what you choose to do with it. And that's all we could do for our patients, right?
Yep, exactly. Well, I'd probably a good, way to kind of close up the show here is to talk about the moral distress in nursing.
Yeah.
What is it that you're seeing with nurses in a leadership role?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm in an emergency department as you are also. And,
Mhm.
it's that constant struggle I watch my staff and my team want to direct patients into, like we've been discussing, to make those best choices for themselves and try to keep them from leaving AMA, or in the same token letting them walk out AMA because they've just given up in trying to have
Mhm.
hard conversations with patients, either because they were never taught how to do so, or they've kind of gotten a little bit calloused.
Mhm.
And so, a patient goes, "Oh, I don't want that treatment. I'm just going to go AMA," and having that, like, nonchalant attitude of, "Yeah, fine, just here's the paper, sign it and go," and not try to, have a pausing attitude and stop and say, "Hey, no, let's talk about this.
Mhm.
Let's involve the physician or the provider, whoever it, nurse practitioner, whoever's seeing that patient, to have a conversation like, hey, these are the risks if you walk out of here." Um,
Mhm.
but then also having those challenging moments of like, you know, but but also it's okay to let them walk out after you've given that education. And
Right,
you,
right. I mean, because I think today we see a lot of people using the emergency room as a primary care doc, right?
yes,
We have so many people coming in and, repeatedly, like, hey,
yeah,
last time we were here, we gave you, a couple weeks supply to, for blood pressure meds, but you were supposed to follow up with your primary care doctor. Did you? And and I'm not going to blame the patients a lot of times,
right,
because they're like, I tried to get in with my primary doc and I can't get in for another month or whatever, and they won't do a telehealth visit for me, which I think is just absolutely ridiculous. When they're so overwhelmed and backed up that they can't do it. But nonetheless, I mean, people, and if you don't have insurance and there's something going on, you're going to the emergency room because we don't
mm-hmm.
turn people away, and having said that, nurses and doctors, we see the same type of patients over and over and over and over again. So it really takes a mindful approach to not be jaded and judgy. So how did you handle that, Annie? How did you handle, like, not getting, you know, um, I don't know, complaining like at the nurses station? Because that's also in our code of ethics. Like, listen, if you're complaining and you can't make any change, then it's your ethical obligation to leave and find something else to do. How did
Yeah,
you, or what, how would you have them handle that?
yeah. I mean, I give a lot of pep talks as a leader. Um,
Mhm.
there's a lot of times where it's like trying to lead people to the conversation of, do you love what you do, and
Mhm.
what's your why? I'm a big give big proponent of, like, give people the why all the time in every facet. I do it with my kids. I do it with my staff. I give them the reason. Hey, we're not going to be, allowing XYZ anymore because this is the reason. And usually, once you give people a reason, it
Mhm.
becomes easier to get their buy-in on it. And I think it kind of becomes the same thing, when you're having pep talks with staff. Hey, if you're seeing someone that's really burnt out and they're just ready to call it quits, it's like, well, what are you here for? And,
Mhm.
sometimes it's a paycheck. And I mean, I don't necessarily, like, we mentioned before, I don't necessarily love that. But it's a
Right.
real part of, this world, is that people are in jobs to get paid. We don't do this work for
Yeah.
free. I mean, I
Right.
wouldn't do it for free either. So I completely am behind that. But it's also then what is the why? If it's not to be there, for your patients in that way, it's to provide for your family. And what do you have
Mhm.
to do to make sure that you're able to provide for them, safely and not put your job in jeopardy, and that's to perform at your job. And
Right.
that's your why. That should be the motivating factor to not losing sight of why you're doing what you're doing.
Right. Because that can infect. I mean, one person comes in with a negative attitude on a shift.
Mm-hmm.
The other people start having negative attitudes.
Yeah.
I had somebody recently say to me, I notice you get up when people start talking about what's going on at work. And I was like, oh, yeah, I removed myself. I don't want no part of it. I don't want anybody to think I was involved in the conversation. I'm certainly not going to sit here and bitch and complain because it does no good. It just does no good.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, but there's changes and you see this and you say that, you see all these things happening. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not my focus. So I change my focus. I change my
Yeah.
focus to the patient in room 7, or, you know what I mean? Or,
Mm-hmm.
someone else that's having a good day. I'll just go talk to them. Like I'm not going to, the one thing I like to say to people is change your perception, you change your reality. So whatever you
Absolutely.
perceive something to be, if you can change your perception of it, then you change the reality, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm in agreement with the negativity. I think it does a disservice not just to yourself, but to the people around you, and that includes the patients. And if you
Right. Right.
clock in with a chip on your shoulder, that's going to come across to the people you work with. It's going to carry over into whether or not you're engaging in a teamwork type environment. It's going to carry over into the tone you use when you're addressing your patients. And it's going to, have a trickle effect on whether or not they trust you when you're giving them information. And,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's part of that ethical dilemma too. If you're
Mm-hmm.
not looking like you enjoy your job or that you care about it, then the trust is gone.
Yep. The trust is gone. I remember in nursing school, I had an instructor that said, if people like you, they won't sue you. And I was like, well, there you go.
Yeah.
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 If they like you, if there's ever anything that happens, they're not going to call you in as a witness. But of course, I told you that this was going to go by way too fast.
It totally did.
It totally did. So we are going to do another show for sure. Really for the new nurses and interviewing and expectations and all of that. I get nurses that reach out to me all the time. And guys, if you guys have any questions that you want us to answer, I would love to have Annie. I'm actually trying to get her to host a show on here because there's so much that she could talk about leadership wise. I mean, we didn't even touch on the 0.1% of it. So,
Yeah.
yes, reach out to us. Go to nursesoutloud.com. Go to our Substack. That is really where I want people to sign up for. If you go to substack.com / the @ nurses out loud, you will get an email every time a show drops. And so you'll be notified basically daily because we speak 5 days a week. 5 days a week at 10 a.m. Eastern time on iHeartRadio. All of our shows go to Apple Podcasts, all the different podcast app. And we're also on Rumble now. So follow us, comment. We want to hear from you. Send us an email, nursesoutloud@gmail.com. And thank you so much, Annie. Until next
Thank you,
time,
Jodi.
friends, be safe, be well, and God bless.
Shining light into darkness, thank you for tuning in to Nurses Out Loud.